Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. I'm iain McNay and today my guest is Rhonda Byrne. Hi Rhonda.
Hi Iain.
And of course Rhonda needs no introduction. She originally put together the film The Secret and then published the book The Secret, has put other books out as well based around The Secret, and she now has the latest book out, been out for a few months, called The Greatest Secret. And we're obviously going to explore this book, but we're also going to talk about her process, because we find on Conscious TV, it's so important that people understand that often it takes time. People have realizations, and then how does the realization change them? And there's the integration of that realization. So we're going to, much as we can, find out how Rhonda's path worked, and hopefully that will be a very helpful interview for many people. So, Rhonda, you started off, I've done obviously some research, and you started off as a radio producer, and then you were a television producer in your native Australia. And actually, I found one of your old films. Do you remember this one? UFOs in Australia.
Oh, I do.
Yeah,
yes, I do. Yes.
Which we
Oz
watched.
Encounters.
Yeah, I thought.
Oh, you did?
I thought it was quite good, actually. I quite enjoyed it because I'm intrigued by UFOs like so many people.
Right. You know, when we made that, people asked me afterwards, do you think UFOs exist? And or that those people really had those experiences. And I said, look, I don't know. All I do know, though, is I don't want to have an encounter. That's all I knew.
I think in a way a lot of us would be intrigued, but we'd probably at the same time be really scared.
Exactly, because all those people, they were pretty, they were pretty scared.
They were, but they're ordinary people, which made it very authentic.
Yes.
Yeah, so, and then around 2004, things happened in your life which turned your life upside down to an extent. Your father died. I think your daughter was quite ill, your business had huge debts and was struggling, and you yourself weren't a happy person at that time, were you? No,
I was not, and 2004 was a really, really challenging year for me. The year or two prior to 2004 had also been quite difficult when I look back, so it was kind of a perfect setup, I think, and 2004, we were making 6 movies about unsolved murders. And so that was really challenging to make, like a very challenging subject. And so we had everything that could go wrong went wrong that year. And I remember sleeping on edit suite floors and all kinds of things like that. And I reached September, and I wasn't well. My relationships were just, I hadn't been able to maintain them. And my mother was in such grief over my father's death. And so I reached September the 9th, and I had 2 phone calls. My accountant calling saying, you're going to lose everything in 30 days. And then I hung up the phone and immediately it rang again. And it was my mother, and I couldn't barely recognize her voice at all. And she said she couldn't go on. And so it was those 2 phone calls that brought me to my knees, because I had no idea how I could solve these things. I'd fixed everything all of my life, and this I could not solve. And so I really just collapsed, and my adult daughter asked me what was wrong, and I kind of brushed it off, and I was in tears and despair. And she came back with this crumpled up, photocopied, bound pieces of paper, and said, here you are, read this, it'll help. And that was The Science of Getting Rich, written by Wallace Wattles. Yes, well done. In 1910, and I sat down and read that book. I can't imagine why I did that, when I was so distraught, but I did, and my tears were making all of the ink run on the photocopied pages. But 90 minutes later, after I read it, my entire life had changed. And I knew more than what was in the book. I can't explain it. I knew we didn't die, but he doesn't cover that in the book at all. And so, yes, and so that is what changed everything. And I knew that we had the power to manifest our lives in whatever way we wanted. So then basically I researched without saying a word to anybody. I researched for 3 months on my own, tracing this knowledge back through history. And so
and
that
you also
is
read this book here, didn't you, too?
Which book's that?
Thought
Can you know about
Vibration.
it?
Thought Vibration.
Oh my gosh, yes, I did. I read William Walker Atkinson. I loved him.
Yeah.
Love him. I read all of the New Thought leaders, and I read all of their books. I bought all of their books. I consumed thousands of books. And wherever I looked, this information was there. So I had a really, really massive awakening at that time, because I realized we were much more than what I thought we were, and that life was not the way that, it was actually the opposite to the way that I thought it worked. And so that was the beginning. And of course, this The Secret, we made The Secret documentary.
But just to stop and just
Sure.
look a little bit what was in the books, because
Yes,
especially the one, The Science of Getting Rich. I read that. It took me more than 90 minutes, so you did very well reading it in 90 minutes. And you got more than was in the book, which is even more impressive. But there was things in there that I hadn't necessarily thought about, because it's not, as you've hinted, it isn't just about getting rich. It's about seeing reality in a different way. And he says things that are very deep, things like formless intelligence is the father. There is one original stuff, he calls it, from which all things are made. And that, of course, is limitless. And we think of things as kind of, there's a limit to what can be achieved or what we can do. We feel, he even mentions there's no limit in the amount of gold on the earth. And I thought that's strange, but of course, if you have that belief, have that thinking, understanding, there are no limits. And that's what I think really got into you at that time, wasn't it?
Yes.
One of the things.
Yes, I mean, he really was incredible. And The Science of Getting Rich is really about getting rich in life, in all aspects of life. So he was extraordinary, and it had such a massive impact on me, that book, and actually all of the New Thought leaders. And I read Charles Harnell, and Charles Harnell really edged into, the infinite being that we are. Actually, they all did. They all spoke about that at that time. And so I love every single one of them. I love all of their books, and I studied all of their lives. So that was just like the beginning for me of an incredible journey.
And there was also this element in the Getting Rich book about being grateful. And it's like, and not being in competition with someone else, but creating something that's unique to you, doing what you love and focusing. And that's where so many people on a journey, they don't always focus. They get distracted. And also in that book is this thing, which I know you know only too well now, which is how the mind has all these programs, mostly historical programs, and it limits and traps us, often unconsciously.
Yes, it does. And gratitude has its has one entire chapter in that book. And so gratitude became a really, really big part of my life. And it still is. Like, if I find anybody is having difficulty or is in some kind of a slump, then the fastest way out of that is gratitude, for sure. Hands down. People will see changes in 24 hours. It's so extraordinary. So gratitude played a big part in The Secret and in all of the work that I continued to do. And it was all due to that book, and just kind of carrying that forward.
Yeah, so after you read the book, you were saying earlier that you kind of knew so much more. So was it like almost you woke up the next day and thought, wow, this is my new life? Was it that instant?
It was actually instant. I remember going to my daughter and saying, where where did you find this? I knew it was the truth. And so I said to her, where did you, do you know what this book says? This book is incredible. And you know, Iain, she doesn't even know why she gave me the book. Like when I said to her, why did you give it to me? She said she didn't know why. She was just kind of moved to give it to me. So yeah, that, I really didn't talk to anybody. And do you know what I did? Just to give you an example of how much I knew it was the truth. The very next day when I was researching, I had reading glasses on, and I would take the reading glasses off and putting the reading glasses on and off, and they weren't working very well, and I needed to go up to the next level. And I just went to put them on, and I paused, and I was like, oh my gosh. I realised that I have taken on a belief that your eyesight diminishes as you get older. And somehow or another I've believed it. And because of that belief, that was my experience. So immediately I closed my eyes and I visualised myself in dark restaurants, reading the menus, in planes, being able to read in every situation where, at that time, where I couldn't read. And in 3 days, I thought it'd be 1 day, but in 3 days, I could see clearly without glasses, and I've never used them since. And so that was the level of my knowing and belief from that book.
So were you aware of changes in your mind insofar as, you know, they talk about the mind of the neurotransmitters firing, and as we get older, that generally, if we believe it, certainly the neurotransmitters slow down. So were you aware that you felt brighter and more focused in your mind afterwards, straight away?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. And I became very aware of thoughts. I could, before I'd lived my life kind of as a thought and as the mind. And I became very aware of thoughts, and especially negative thoughts. And so everything changed. My whole life changed. I became very aware of, if I was talking to somebody and something came out of my mouth, I realized that was a belief that I had, and so then I was able to change it. And so that was what I did. I just did massive internal work, and my entire life changed, of course.
Yeah, so this showed you somehow the gateway, and you had to do the homework, and that's often what people don't realise. They think enlightenment, self-realisation, freedom suddenly comes and everything changes, it's all hunky-dory. But of course you've got to do the homework. And that is, you have to stay focused for that, and you have to put the time in, and you have to believe in it and be consistent. And I think you mentioned this somewhere too, that you have to, if people are negative in your life, you have to say, whoa, this is not for me at the moment anymore.
Exactly, you do. It really needs to matter to you a lot that you are feeling good, which is what I talk about in The Secret, because if you're feeling good, you are not going to have negative thoughts. That's an impossibility. So if you're feeling good, then all of the thoughts are going to be positive and good. And so it becomes really important that you feel good. And that is not at all selfish, because how can you be of any service or help to anybody unless you are feeling good yourself? Then you can help others. So that's what became very, very important to me, is watching my thoughts and not energizing negative thoughts and things that I did not want.
Yes, and you also did some things that might seem a bit crazy. You were giving money away you didn't really have. You were walking down the street saying, I am abundant, even though you had lots of debts.
You're right. I had so much debt. I just had, because I was like $2 million in debt, and then I have to get this knowledge out to the world. And so, and I had a belief in the lack of money, just like so many people, you know, from upbringing and parents and kind of a poverty consciousness. Money would come in and then it would go out again. And so I knew that the mind was a program, and I needed to reprogram it into wealth consciousness and not poverty consciousness. And I knew I needed to do that for The Secret to be a success. So
Right.
it was really on my shoulders to change the internal mechanics of me so that I was at the level of a success of The Secret, and so that it could do what I wanted it to do, which was bring joy to many millions of people. So I did. I would walk down the street with mantras, I'm abundant. And usually that happened when something happened in the company and it was payday the next day and I did not have the money to pay everybody.
Wow.
And so I would be walking out in the street and saying, there's only abundance, I'm breathing in abundance. And I would do all of that. And you know what? So extraordinary. But our accountant would say, oh, we just got a transfer of money in from the UK for something like Oz Encounters that we'd made. And I had enough just to pay everybody. So I was kind of on the edge, but I could see the more work that I did internally, I began to see everything change around me. And one of the things that I felt was that I didn't feel good about money. And I needed to change that. And so what I did was I went and drew money out from my credit card and I held $20 in my hand. This was in Australia. And then I would walk down the street with the $20 looking for who to give this money to. And $20 was quite a lot then. And I would look at every person, really connect with every person and imagine giving it to them and giving it to that person and giving it to that person. And something so amazing happened when I did that, because I just, like my heart I was out of my head and into my heart. And I felt so connected with everybody on the street. I wanted to give it to everybody. And in the end, I just mentally said, show me clearly who to give it to. And so, and it was perfect really, because a whole bunch of kids just came out of a store, a record store, and they were like adding up all of their money and they didn't have enough to buy what they wanted to buy. And so, and I just handed them the $20, and it was so beautiful. They said, "Thanks, lady," and ran back into the store.
So where did the idea or the name The Secret come from? Was it something you woke up with one morning, or how did you get the name The Secret?
I actually used The Secret to get the name The Secret. So what I did was I asked to be given the perfect name that would bring joy to millions.
So you already had the idea of the film at this point, and you needed a name to.
And I didn't have the title. Yeah. Pardon me. And so I asked for the perfect title to bring joy to millions, and it just came from formlessness. It just came, The Secret, and I knew it was it. I knew it was it. And then what was extraordinary was all of those new thought leaders, they kind of, The Secret was in, the words The Secret was in all of their work.
Yes.
And I'm like, and so I was having it confirmed over and over and over again to be called The Secret.
Yeah, and then you went to America with a crew. You made sure the crew had the same belief, if you like, in The Secret as you did, and you had no appointments. But you found 55 people and did interviews 120 hours in was it 3 weeks or something extraordinary.
That's right. Again, using The Secret. But do you know, when you are authentic, when your heart is full to want to help humanity, I just think the universe will drop every obstacle and lay everything at your feet. And truly, that is what happened for us. Yes, we did not have one thing lined up, not one thing. But I knew that all we needed to do was land in America and we would have everything we needed. And that's exactly what happened. And
also you maxed out on your credit cards, you remortgaged your house. You really went 100% for it, didn't you?
Yeah, I took out an overdraft with my company. I did. I maxed out my house to the limit. I borrowed money wherever I could borrow it to make the film. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, we have to admire this commitment. Some people would say that's madness. That's all your eggs in one basket. But you knew, didn't you? You knew it would work.
Ian, you know what? It's so incredible when you know something so, to that level. And I absolutely knew that. Like people say, what would have happened had it failed? Well, I would have been on the streets, actually. I would have lost everything. And so people considered it very risky. But for me, it wasn't risky at all, because I knew what it would do. I absolutely knew it. And so it wasn't a risk. That doesn't mean I didn't have really intense, challenging moments along the way. Joseph Campbell's so right in many ways of the hero's journey. You know, you do have a journey and you do have dark moments, and you do have to find the courage in the face of really scary situations. But when you can go through all of that and never give up, oh wow, then it's fantastic.
Absolutely. And then the film comes out, and it was it a success straight away, or was it something that took a little bit of time to take off?
I was a success straight away.
Yeah.
Like within the first hour, it was incredible.
The first hour, wow.
Yes. And we were the first film to be streamed on the internet.
Really?
First ever.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And my CEO was very technically minded, and he worked with a company in Australia to create pause, fast forward, rewind, all of those things. And so, yeah, it was the first film. So we released it online. I actually always knew that I had visualized it going out around the world within 24 hours. Actually, I thought it would go out on television. That's why, because that was my background. But every door of television closed, it slammed shut in my face. And then this particular day, I saw a British Airways commercial on the internet, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's it. We go out on the internet.
Yeah.
And so we were the first film, and in 1 hour, it was crazy. Yeah.
And was there an element of you that was surprised, or you just felt, I knew this was going to happen, this is the way it is? What was your response?
I knew it was going to happen, but when it happens, it's just incredible. It's so humbling. And now I sort of have that feeling of that moment when we released it. And I was just so happy that it was released. And I really didn't care what happened from there, because it was out in the world, and that was all that mattered to me, is that the world had this knowledge. And so, but it was, I just felt so humbled and so happy and content. And then with it taking off the way it did, I knew it would do that. However, the experience of it was just incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you wrote the book, or put together the book, The Secret, in 18 days. That's another very fast thing that happened. And that, again, took off really dramatically, didn't it?
It did, yes. I remember talking to Simon & Schuster, and we were having a publicity talk, a chat, and they said, we think this book will sell 1 million copies during the call. And all together, you know, through history. And I said, oh my goodness, no, it will sell 1 million within a couple of months. And they all kind of fell off their chairs, but it did. That's exactly what it did. But, you know, I just knew that, like, you know, that's just from who we are. That was just coming from who we are. I knew what it would do. Not because we were so clever. My gosh, we were given everything that we needed. We're the lucky ones that got to be a part of it.
And how's that to go from debt and relatively obscurity? You were obscure, but you weren't that well known, and suddenly you're rich and famous. How's that?
I know.
And you have to. That's a whole new thing to handle in its own way, isn't it?
It was, yes, it was. And I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and where I couldn't walk anywhere. I would walk down the street, and there would just be one person after another stop me, and they would tell me, my mother told me about The Secret and how her life has changed and their life has changed. And so basically I spent most of my time just in tears, with all of these people and just so grateful. Just, oh my gosh, just can't tell you. Just in one person's life changing is so amazing, you know. So I was really, really just so humbled and grateful. But then it got very tricky because I couldn't go anywhere, and people were taking photographs of me everywhere, and I didn't really mind. But then I ended up an hour and a half away, and where I am is very peaceful, and there are so many celebrities here, nobody cares about anything. I mean, we've got Harry and Meghan here, so Prince Harry and Meghan, so there are lots of Oprah and Ellen and all of those people, and nobody takes any notice of them. So
in other interviews I watched with you, it's like I could tell how touched you were when people said to you what a dramatic effect the book and the film had in their lives. Is that something that you were at all in touch with beforehand, that feeling to be moved and touched, or was that something that came out of your own process?
I just can't. You know what? The people elicit that out of me. Is I feel such a deep connection to human beings, and just think we are so incredibly courageous for doing this planet Earth thing, and so I. When somebody stands in front of me, I'm just, even today, when people talk to me about how The Secret has changed their life, or even The Greatest Secret, when they're talking about that, I'm really, really just, I'm so, it's just my heart melts. I can't explain it. My heart just melts, and I feel such enormous love. It's really overwhelming. Just an incredible love for everybody.
I think one of the things that impressed me the most about you was, with all this had happened, here you are, you say you feel incredible love, your whole life has changed from poverty to prosperity, you're helping millions of people, and yet your journey went on. In fact, you talk about your journey was only just started, and that from 2005, 2006 onwards, it was a 10-year journey. And you were exploring, you were going to other people's seminars, and I've got a list here of all the things you did, which you probably know better than me, but extraordinary. You kind of, well, why don't you talk us through it, your process of going to listen to these teachers, learning something, and then moving on to something else, because that is so fascinating.
Yes. Well, The Secret kind of set off a spark, and I knew that was the truth for our life here on planet Earth. So then I knew there must be more of the truth. So I just became a seeker, a really, really incredible seeker. I read, I listened to, and watched everything I could get my hands on 24/7. Now, I could do it 24/7 because that was my work, and it was my greatest joy. So weekends, that's all that I was doing. And I went, it was an amazing journey. And initially, I was made an honorary member of the Rose Cross teachings. And so I followed those teachings, and that was a progressive path. And I followed those teachings for quite a long time. And that was many years. And I had a lot of experience, really incredible experiences through those teachings. But I read all of the alchemists, all of the Christian esoterics from hundreds of years ago. I just read everything that I could possibly read. And then I kind of moved. I was very drawn to the past and the past teachers. And then I sort of gradually moved to living teachers. And that's when I began to follow, pardon me, I think it was like a little bit before 2016, a few years before 2016. I mean, I found Conscious TV, of course. So that became a part of my life, watching all of those interviews that you and Renata did. And all of those impacted me as well. Every time I watched something or listened to something, there was just another glimpse and another, but I had no idea what I was looking for. I was just, I've got to find more of the truth.
Yes,
and
so something was driving you to find, as you put it, more of the truth. And how did that feel? How did that drive feel at the time? Do you remember?
Yes, I do remember. You can't stop it. You just can't stop it. Like,
yes.
It takes over you. It's just nothing else matters but that. And every second you just want to look for more and find more. It's like a fire inside, a spiritual fire inside of you, and it's glorious. It's really glorious.
So yeah, I'm just looking at some of the things you explored. You mentioned the esoteric Christian, and then Buddhism, theology, Hinduism, Taoism, Sufism, Krishnamurti, Ramana Maharishi. There's just a lot there.
There's a lot there, isn't there? I know, that's true. And every single one of those teachers impacted my life enormously. Krishnamurti too, because earlier in my life, in my 30s, my husband fell in love with Krishnamurti. And so we had Krishnamurti in our lives for 10 years. And, I used to get really mad at him because I'd listen and he'd say, don't do this or this or this. And so my natural question was, well, then what do I do? And somebody would ask that, and he'd get really frustrated and say, you've missed it, And so I used to get really frustrated listening to him. But he still had a big impact on me. It's just something about him that fascinated me. And of course, then eventually I found Ramana Maharshi. I then sort of moved more to, I can remember saying to a mentor of mine from the Rose Cross teachings, there must be a faster way. And he said, what's the rush? You've got all of eternity. And I said, but there must be a faster way, because I can think there's a faster way, which means there must be a faster way. And so, and really that is when I began to move more towards the direct path. And it was kind of a mixture, I think, because the direct path included everything of the power of our mind and what we can do on earth. And I never wanted to leave that behind because I know that if you want to manifest on earth, that is what you need to do. And so I always wanted to take that with me. And so it was really a journey, actually, to find, to merge those two things together, I have to say, the direct path and then the secret. And it was actually Robert Adams who created the bridge for the two. I found him and I read his book, and to this day, Silence of the Heart is one of my most treasured books of all time. I can just open that book and just lose myself in that book.
So what form did the bridge take for you?
He wrote a book, I think it was called The Secret to Happiness, and there was just a paragraph that he wrote. He always shared the teachings about manifesting. And so he incorporated the direct path with manifesting. And so he really, I remember there was this one paragraph and I was like, that's it. There's the bridge. And I can't remember what was in the paragraph, but I just remember the way that he put it together. And then I found the secret and the greater secret, come together. And of course, there were all of the teachers that are in the greater secret, and all of those teachers became my teachers on my journey from the secret to the greater secret. And Conscious TV was a part of that. You played such a big part in my journey as well, as you know.
Yes, because there was this time in 2016 and you just didn't, I'm just looking at my notes to see exactly what the situation was, but something happened and you were deeply disappointed, and then you were online and you found, I think it was me, interviewing David Bingham, who's a friend of ours who we've known a long time, and you had a chat with David Bingham on the phone and then something clicked. So what clicked?
Well, David said I'd already realised who I was when I spoke with him. And I said to him, had I really? But when I watched the interview that he did with you, he mentioned that he woke up from a podcast with John Wheeler.
That's right.
He'd listened to a podcast with John Wheeler. And so I immediately looked for that podcast and I found it and I listened to it and oh my gosh, I got a really big glimpse when I listened to that podcast. Then I went back and listened to David's interview again. And so, it was really interesting. Like some people just wake up, boom. But for me, it was like, this sort of, I don't know, everything like dropping or something. And so I began seeing that what we really are. And when I spoke to David did some exercises with me of looking at something with my mind and then to look at something as awareness, so not focused at all. And after that phone call, that was it. I can remember calling a spiritual friend of mine and saying, oh my gosh, I know who we are. I know who we are. Oh, and we've missed it. We've missed it. Like, I couldn't believe I'd done all of those years, And I think I'd maybe heard teachers talk about it. Like, I'd already been following Mooji and Adyashanti, and so they must have mentioned it, but somehow it didn't work. It didn't penetrate. But that interview with David, that just changed my life. And I listened to that on the 10th of January, 2016. You see, I remember the exact day. And so that would be my greatest awakening.
And you had the awakening, you had the realization. How did that change things practically in your life?
Oh gosh, everything changed then because there was just this peace that came over me. However, I knew there was work to be done because the mind would come in and I could be awareness, but then the mind would come in and so there was kind of a yo-yo kind of time, awareness and the mind and awareness and the mind and ego. And so the last 4 years really is what I have dedicated to just being who I am, just resting as awareness. And so it was, is a little bit of a journey, but the thing is that you just have this happiness arise within you. There's no mistaking it. The happiness that was always there just begins to arise and take over your life. And the most beautiful feeling is that you don't need anything to change. Everything's just fine as it is.
Yes, but you'd created the space for that, hadn't you, to a large extent? And that's, for so many of us, we hear things and then years later we realise, gosh, that's it, that's important, that's my next step, that's my awakening or whatever. And of course, there wasn't the space before. And it was the Thought Vibration book where it reminded me again about how you slow down the mind. If you slow down the mind, of course, there's more space for things to come in a more subtle way. You're not racing around and filling everything up. And I'm sure that's what happened with you. It was the right time and you'd done the work. And I keep stressing that a lot these days in interviews, because so many people still think something happens and it's wonderful, and it isn't quite like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I did a lot of work, I have to say, and continue to just be aware. But now there's just a happiness, a foundation of happiness that's always there, no matter what is going on. So this beautiful happiness, and just one of the other big things that I've noticed is fear dissipating. And so not living in a foundation of fear as well. And just, it's really nice not to have a strong ego in your life. It's really great to have that sort of dissolving, you know, because you don't mind about what anybody thinks. You don't mind about anything. There's nothing to protect. There's nothing to defend. It's freedom, you know, it really is.
So the realization was, of course, as you said, that we are awareness. And awareness is the base of everything. And I remember, you know, Renata and I had quite a significant awakening when David Bingham was at our house, and he came for lunch one day. So after we'd done the interviews, we got a bit friendly with him, and we saw him a couple of times, and he just said these words, and the words were, well, there's the changing, and then there's a never changing. And you think about it, the changing, form is always changing, the never changing, awareness, the formless. Beautiful. And of course it ties in so well with quantum physics as well. When someone I interview with quantum physics, they talk about the chaos, and the chaos is form, and the order is the formless. Because in the formless, there has to be order, because there's no room for there's no space for chaos. And it is, right. and I, you know, what interests me, and I think you still work with a teacher, don't you? You have a woman who's a teacher you still work with. And
yes,
it's
I do.
like, I guess you're refining things the whole time. Is that how you see it?
Yes, and I look at her, my teacher, I look at her and the way that she is, and I just, she's just, oh my gosh, so amazing. Every question that anybody asks her, the answer is incredible and just makes total sense. And so she's very inspiring to go even higher level of happiness and peace, to keep going. And so, yeah, and she helped me a lot because she's very tough on me. And that is what I wanted. I didn't want to waste time. I wasn't 20 years old, and so I wanted somebody to be super, super tough on me. And she was really tough, and so that kind of helped break, you know, those tendencies and the mind programs and everything. She was really good at spotting those, and she would just say something, and I would be like, oh, I'd see it. You know, some tendency or belief that I'd had for ages and ages, and it would just crumble in front of me. So, and so she also helped me, and which is also in The Greatest Secret, which is, I just think one of the most incredible things in The Greatest Secret is the way to release negative emotions and negative thoughts. And so that's something I've been doing for 4 years, and I don't anymore. It's so rare for me to feel impatience or disappointment or anything like that, and that's just from the work of releasing all of those things. And of course, each time you release them, you get happier.
Yeah, and you talk, I should say, in the book, you certainly talk, and there are techniques there. There are clues how to clear yourself of these negative patterns, and it's down to whether somebody wants to do it and commit themselves, and you're just so committed. And you still are committed to still work with a teacher now. Just shows the level of your commitment. So what does freedom ultimately mean to you? Do you feel completely free? The way you talk, it's almost like you are completely free. But do you still feel there's something and clarity there that still needs to fade away in its own time?
I'm certainly freer than I ever imagined I could be. But I would say there's still some things there. If I look at my teacher, I can see my teacher is total pure freedom. And so I think there are the subconscious has still probably got a few things going on. And they would be very deep, and maybe they're from the collective unconscious, you know. But certainly, I mean, you know, Ian, it's like every day I feel that I'm freer.
Every day?
Yeah, every day I wake up and I feel happier and freer, and yeah. So And it's just from doing everything that I wrote in the book. I mean, I wrote what I did, what worked for me, and it's quite simple, really. And I think, you know, the mind wants to complicate it, and we want to complicate it. But awareness is really, really simple. I mean, it's here all of the time, and even just when you just say the word, it's there. You know, it's in the foreground. It's right there, so beautiful and right there. And that's all it takes, is just noticing it, and then it gets stronger, and the mind gets weaker.
Yeah, well, awareness is always there, but of course you have to have, as we talked about earlier, the space to let it be more in the foreground. And this is what people that do wake up, they often say, well, the background became the foreground and the foreground became the background. And that's it really, isn't it? And a lot of people can say, yes, they know their awareness, and then things happen and they're all over the place. And
yes.
And that's...
And you have to be careful that you have to be careful that the mind doesn't sort of trick you and you turn it into a concept, you know, because awareness is not a concept. You know, it's a being. You know, all it is. I mean, Lester Levinson, who is featured in the book, and a teacher that, oh my gosh, love him so much. He just says everything so simply. He just says, you are yourself without the mind. That's what you are. Just without the mind.
Yeah, and it is something that isn't always easy to spot. What is the unique expression as a human being of you without all your historical conditioning? Because they're mired together, interwoven, and I find that for myself. Yes, I'm me, and of course that me isn't necessarily the purest me, because it has all my historical patterns that I haven't yet dissipated, and that's
yes.
I guess that's what, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I guess maybe that's to some extent what your ongoing journey still is, just to purify and purify. Is that the case?
It is. And, you know, one of the traps that I had was I was looking for another version for quite a long time. Even though my teacher would say, you are here now, and I would be I was kind of looking for something else that wasn't some other form of me, the infinite being of me. I was looking for that, and for quite a while. And then I just realized, okay, so here's what it is take away the name and take away the history of this, you know, body form, take away the Rhonda and take away the history and take away the body. And what's left is who I really am. And so it's just taking away the mind and the body, and what's left. And the me that I feel myself to be is the being, just not with any of those other stories. You know, it's just what's left, and it is here right now. It's here. Here it is. It's not over there, or it's right here. And it's, if you can just take away the name and the history and the body and the mind, then what's left is you. And it's the you that you feel yourself to be. It just doesn't have any baggage. And the you that you feel yourself to be is actually gloriously happy.
The me that you feel yourself to be is gloriously happy. And
Absolutely.
You look gloriously happy at the moment.
I do.
Yes,
I
you do. Yeah. So you're a living example of that. And you say, I just pulled some quotes from I should show the book, The Greatest Secret. And one quote I pulled out was, the only purpose of life is to be totally who you are.
Yes, gosh.
And that's where you've got to, isn't it? And that's where real seekers finally get to. The only purpose of life is to be totally who you are. So, and actually, if I look back at right at the beginning of your journey, The Science of Getting Rich, in his own way, he says that it's not about.
That's gorgeous.
It's not about pleasing people, and he says, don't give charity to the poor. You encourage the poor to start in their own way when they can, taking responsibility and find their own way in life. And that's sometimes difficult to do, but it's the key, isn't it? It's the key to everything. It is the key.
Really. And then when you're free, just everything is a miracle. Every moment is a miracle, and just the joy and the love and the gratitude. It's not gratitude to somebody; it's just gratitude for being. All of it is just so wonderful. That's all. I mean, it's the one thing to do in this lifetime. It really is the one thing to do.
Yeah.
Because then everything else falls into place. Everything that you need or want, and so it was really important to me that not to suggest you go off into a cave cross-legged or something like that, because we're here on planet Earth to have this experience on planet Earth, but have the experience on planet Earth of knowing who you really are, and there's no end to you.
Yes.
And the absolute beauty that we are, the innocence that we are. Oh my gosh. I just think we are so incredible to take this on, because it can be tough, right?
Well, it's the people with huge challenges, and
yes.
Renata and I are involved in supporting a charity called the Prison Phoenix Trust, and what that does is it supports through meditation and yoga people in prison. Now they really do have a challenge, but some of them do rise to it, and they use that time in the prison cell, it's only a small cell, to do their yoga, to do their meditation. Some get up at 5 a.m. when the prison's quieter, do their meditation, and then somehow they find the beginning of some peace. But you and I are comparatively lucky because we're in the free world. We've had our challenges, of course, but some people do find it tough. But as you say, the potential is, and people are also very sick, but the potential is somewhere there in their own way.
Well, yes, and then everything that's happening is to help lead us to wake up, as well. And so, I woke up through difficult times. And so on both occasions, the two big awakenings were in challenging times. And so the challenging times help us. They help us question, and question about life and question about our own existence. And so, the challenges have their place too. And it's not easy going through those times. But then every time I would come out of one of those, I was so grateful. I remember my mentor would say to me, at the end of your journey, he said, you will be so grateful to God for all of the difficulties that you faced. And I did not believe him. Because at that time I was going through an intensely difficult time. And he told me I'd be grateful for that time. And I couldn't believe I would ever be grateful for that challenge. But do you know what? I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for all of it. Yeah.
We've got 3 or 4 minutes left, Rhonda. Is there anything else you want to say that's in the greatest secret that you think is so important that people just have a look at that particular page, or exercise, because you have some exercises in there?
Yes. Well, it's a book that I hope people will find simple enough. It's not easy to write about something that's invisible, but I tend to write about things that are invisible, as I did with The Secret as well. But there's just a promise, that when you realize who you are, everything will fall into place. You won't suffer from anxiety or stress or any of those things anymore. There might be a moment that comes, but it'll just pass on by. And to live your life without fear of death in particular, and without fear anyway, is just the most glorious way to live your life. So I would just urge anybody, if you feel there are a lot of problems that you have, or you're going through any challenges, I want you to know there's a way out. And the way out is absolutely gorgeous. I think it's just lined with rose petals. And if you can just take the steps that are necessary, and everybody can do it because it's who you are, right? It's not, this is who you are. And so it's just lifting up that blanket that's covering up who you are. Yes, I would say to anybody to be free. But I want to say to you in particular and to Renata, thank you. Because I've had so many wonderful hours watching your interviews and having so many aha moments and replaying things over and over again with guests. And so I want to say thank you to both of you, because you really made a big difference in my life, and I'm sure so many other people's lives as well. But yeah, Conscious TV has been wonderful for me.
Thank you.
And so really such a service that you have both done.
Yeah, it's been our journey. When I had the idea all those years ago, it was about somehow a progression of my journey and Renata's journey, and we got so much out of doing the interviews. So, as they say, it's a complete win-win situation, and continues to be. And we do less interviews now, but the ones we do, we still value so much. So, I'm looking at the clock. We've pretty much got there within an hour. Really appreciate your time and your wisdom, Rhonda. And good luck with the further stages of your journey, or the further stages of awareness journey. Yeah.
Thank you, Iain, so much. Thank you for having me.
And thank you everyone for watching Conscious TV, and I do hope we see you again soon. Goodbye.